everyone. Let's see what Peter and Fudge and Tootsie are up to. It's Christmas time over in America in this story. We're in the middle of chapter 10. On Christmas morning, Fudge woke the rest of us up way before 6 o'clock. "I got it! I got it! I got it!" he shrieked. "A big red bicycle without training wheels. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Santa, wherever you are." We all ran downstairs to open our presents. Turtle got everything on his list, and so did Tootsie. She preferred the wrapping paper and the ribbons to anything else. Besides my calculator and radio, I got a surprise. I got a gift token for 2 albums. At 7:30, Mom whipped up a batch of pancakes. At 10 o'clock, Dad fell asleep on the living room sofa, and Mom conked out right on the floor. That night, Fudge came into my room. I was sitting up in bed reading the instruction manual that came with my radio. "Will you teach me to ride my bike?" he asked. "Sure," I told him, "as soon as the snow melts." "Daniel says he's going to learn to ride on the grass." "That's crazy." "But if you fall off your bike in the street, you can get hurt," Fudge said. "Yeah, so you'll get a few scraped knees." "Yeah, but scraped knees bleed, don't they?" "Well, sometimes," I said. "I don't want to bleed." "Don't worry." "Did you get scraped knees when you were learning to ride?" "A couple of times," I said, "but you don't fall off that much. Believe me." Chapter 11, Catastrophes. Not just one catastrophe, but catastrophes plural. Dad stopped talking about his book. I had the feeling it wasn't going very well. Instead, he talked about vegetables and how to cook them Chinese style, or about the Princeton University hockey team. Dad and I go to all their home games. When Jimmy Fargo came to visit, he joined us. "I'm really into violence," Jimmy said. "I think hockey's a great game. It's a lot bloodier than football, and there are more team fights." "Well, that's not what hockey is all about," Dad argued. "It's a game of skill, of timing, of precision." "Yeah, sure," Jimmy said. "I know all that. But it's still great to see the blood bounce on the ice." "Blood bounces on ice?" I asked. "Yeah," Jimmy said. "And so does vomit. See, it has to do with the temperature of the ice versus the temperature of the body, and—" "Jimmy, please," Dad said. "It's true, Mr. Hatcher. They both bounce on ice." "Yeah, maybe so," Dad said, "but that's not the reason we go to the games." "I know," Jimmy said, "but it's a nice side event." So when they say hockey, they mean ice hockey. So hockey played on an ice rink. It's quite a fast, very physical game. Dad shook his head and began to check off players' names on the list inside his program. Jimmy leaned across me and tapped Dad's arm. "I'm not a violent person, Mr. Hatcher. Don't get the wrong idea. It's just that it's a, healthy way to use up some of my aggressive energy." "Hey, Jimmy," I said. "Yeah?" "Shut up." "Okay, sure," Jimmy said. And he was quiet until the end of the 3rd quarter, when 4 of the players got into a fight, and then he stood up and yelled, "Kill, kill!" And I tugged at his sweater until he sat down again. Later, when I was in bed and Jimmy was in his sleeping bag, he said, "I've been seeing the school psychologist twice a week. She says I have a lot of anger because my parents split up. Take my word for it, Peter, divorce is a catastrophe. You should watch your parents all the time and listen to every word they say so they can't ever take you by surprise." For the next couple of weeks, I paid close attention to my parents, looking for possible signs of divorce. But I didn't see or hear anything unusual. And soon I got tired of watching and listening. Besides, whenever my parents fight, they wind up laughing. In February, we celebrated Tootsie's 1st birthday. She carried on a family tradition of smashing her fist into her birthday cake. Grandma, who believes in handing out gifts for everyone, not just the birthday person, brought me a pen and Fudge a brand new Brian Tumpkin book. Read, Fudge told Grandma. She took him on her lap and read him the latest story about Uriah, Brian Tumpkin's favorite character. I used to really like his books when I was a little kid, I said. I'm not a little kid, Fudge reminded me. Next year I'll be in first grade. You want to see a little kid? Look at the birthday girl. The birthday girl was sitting in her high chair, making a mess. Grandma had brought her a new baby-proof cup, one that refuses to turn over no matter how hard Tootsie tries. Now finally Tootsie screeched, picked up the cup, and just dumped her milk over her head. Tootsie's first birthday party could go down as a real catastrophe, I said. What's a catastrophe? Fudge asked. It's when something goes wrong, I said. Or when everything goes wrong, Mom added. Now talk about catastrophes. 6 weeks later, Tootsie learned to walk. I mean, at first it was just a few feet at a time from Mom to Dad or from me to Fudge. But pretty soon she was toddling all over the place. Sometimes she'd crash land. And if no one was watching, she'd laugh and start over again. But if she caught one of us looking at her, she'd stop bawling and wouldn't stop until she got a cookie. And Tootsie wasn't the only one crash landing. Fudge was learning to ride his bicycle. One of his major problems was stopping. Instead of using his brakes, he kept trying to jump off while his bike was still going. I was wrong when I told him he might get a couple of scraped knees. It was elbows, knees, head was more like it. Constantly. But he refused to give up. He was really determined to get to ride to school. Finally, towards the end of April, Mom and Dad decided that Fudge had mastered the art of bike riding well enough to ride to school with Daniel, who had learned on his front lawn. Just the way he said he would, without a bruise or a scrape anywhere. And it would have turned out okay if Fudge had remembered to use his brakes when he got to the bike rack at school. But he didn't. So he crashed into the rack, knocking down a whole pile of bikes, and he wound up with scraped elbows, scraped knees, and torn jeans. Don't tell Mommy, Fudge said, or she'll never let me ride to school again. I think Mommy's gonna notice anyway, I said. You're a mess. I carried him into the nurse's room, and Miss Elliot washed off his cuts and bruises with peroxide. And when she did, Fudge let out a howl. Not that I blamed him, and I could practically feel the sting myself. But Fudge didn't stop at one howl. He kept it up, making such a racket that Mr. Green, the principal, heard him and came running down the hall. What's going on here? Mr. Green said. Oh, just scraped knees and elbows, Miss Elliot said. Scraped knees and elbows, Mr. Green repeated. You know, when I was a boy, I had scraped knees and elbows all the time. Used to roller skate and fall down week after week. Fudge sniffed and said, Well, too bad you weren't any good at it. Oh, who says I wasn't any good at it? Mr. Green asked. You said you were always falling down, Fudge said. Oh, well, that's because I took a lot of chances, Mr. Green said. Now, I want you to hurry back to your classroom because we're having a surprise visitor in a little while. Who is it? Fudge asked. It's a very famous man, someone who writes and illustrates children's books. His name is Brian Tumpkin. Brian Tumpkin is alive? Fudge asked. Oh, yeah, alive and well, and he's on his way to our school. Brian Tumpkin is alive, Fudge said again. I never knew that. Did you know that, Peter? Well, I never thought about it, I said. Mr. Green faced Miss Elliot and said, Lucky break for all of us that he's agreed to come and talk to our girls and boys. Oh, I'm afraid I don't know who he is, Miss Elliot said. Yeah, well, then you must be dumber than I thought, Fudge told her. I mean, first you put peroxide on my cuts without blowing to take away the sting, and now you don't even know who Brian Tumpkin is. I never blow on cuts, Miss Elliot said. You can spread germs that way. You know, Mommy always blows when she puts on peroxide. Okay, yes, well, Mr. Green's head, let's get back to our classrooms now. It's almost time for Mr. Tumpkin's talk. At 10 o'clock, we all filed into the auditorium, Then Mrs. Morgan, the librarian, introduced Brian Tumpkin, telling us that millions of kids have read and loved his books and how lucky we are that he was able to make a last-minute stop at our school. Brian Tumpkin walked on stage. He was tall, with gray hair and a gray beard. He waved to us, and then he turned and beckoned to someone backstage. "I've brought a friend with me," he said. "Come on, Uriah, hurry up. The boys and girls are waiting for you." Nobody came out on stage, but Brian Tumpkin pretended that Uriah had. He pretended to be holding Uriah's hand, and he kept talking to him as if he were really there. I thought, either this guy is really wacko, or he's a great actor. Finally, he looked out at the audience and asked if any of us saw Uriah. Someone down the front called out, "I see him!" I didn't even have to look. I knew who that voice belonged to. "You see," Brian Tumpkin told the rest of us, "one of you can see Uriah. Come up here, young man." The next thing I knew, Fudge was on stage. I slid down in my seat. "What's your name, young man?" "Fudge." "That's an unusual name," Miss Brian Tumpkin said. "I know it is," Fudge said. "Okay, well, how would you feel about helping me out today, Fudge?" "It's a real privilege," Fudge said. I couldn't believe it. It finally learned how to use the word. You could see that Brian Tumpkin was impressed. He said, "Well, it's a real privilege for me too." "That makes it unanimous," Fudge said. "My, you certainly have an impressive vocabulary," Brian Tumpkin said. "I learn a lot of words at home." "That's wonderful." "Now, some of them I'm not allowed to say at school. Some of them my bird can say. His name is Uncle Feather." I slid lower down in my seat. "What grade are you in, Fudge?" Brian Tumpkin asked. "Kindergarten." "Who is your teacher?" "Well, I started out in Ratface's class, but now I'm in Miss Ziff's class, and she's a lot nicer than Miss Ziff. A lot nicer than Ratface." I covered my face with my hand. Let's get on with our chalk talk now, shall we?" Brian Tumpkin said. "What's chalk talk?" Fudge asked. "Well, I'm going to sit down at my easel," Brian Tumpkin said, walking across the stage, "and you're going to describe a person to me, and I'm going to draw the person you describe. Do you think you can do that?" "Yes," Fudge said. "It's a man." "Oh, I'll need more help than that," Brian Tumpkin said, picking up a piece of chalk. "Is he tall or short?" "Oh, he's tall," Fudge said, "and he's got a fat belly that hangs over his trousers, and he's mostly bald, but he's got some hair around the edges, and he wears glasses, and he's got a pointy nose and a mustache that curled down around his mouth." Brian Tumpkin was drawing as fast as Fudge was talking. "Oh, and he's got crooked front teeth, and his feet are very long, and he walks like this," Fudge said, giving us a demonstration. "Like a duck?" Brian Tumpkin asked. "Yes," Fudge said. All of a sudden, I knew who Fudge was describing, and I wanted to get out of the auditorium as fast as I could. But then Fudge looked out in the audience and called, "Where are you, Peter? I can't see you." Oh, and I knew I couldn't get up without having everybody look at me. So I slouched down as low as I could and I didn't answer. "Peter, can you see me?" I let out a groan. Joanne, who was sitting behind me, giggled. "I can't find my brother," Fudge told Brian Tumpkin. "Oh, you'll find him later," Brian Tumpkin said. "Now, you haven't told me what this man is wearing." "Oh," Fudge said, "he's wearing a blue shirt and a tie with stripes and brown trousers and brown socks and brown shoes and brown shoelaces." "Brown shoelaces," Brian Tumpkin repeated. "Okay, there we are." He brushed off his hands and held up the picture. "Does he look like anyone you know, Fudge?" "Yes," Fudge said. "Who?" Brian Tumpkin asked. "Mr. Green," Fudge said, and everyone laughed. Brian Tumpkin smiled. "Well, who is Mr. Green?" "The principal," Fudge said. Now the audience roared. Oh dear, Brown Tumpkin said, oh my, and he put his hand to his mouth, but you could see he was trying hard not to laugh. I have to stop there. Nearly at the end of the chapter. Join me tomorrow and see how Mr. Green, the principal, reacts to his caricature, his picture.